Sorry for the long story, but it's difficult to shorten a lifetime of events. This is my second story to this side, to which I have a few more. I will write them in order in which they happened in my life, but you do not need to have read any other story to understand this one. So this story kind of starts at 3, and I would say it's still going on. At the age of 3 we moved from a flat or apartment to my granny's house, as my dad had just walked out and my mum needed support. It was still me, my mum and 2 sisters plus my granny and granddad who lived there already. My granny's house was kind of split in half. My mum's bedroom, grandparents' bedroom, the living room and the kitchen was at one side, and me and my sister's bedroom and an unused living room down the other side by the door. Sorry, but the house layout is important for later. The house we stayed in wasn't particularly old, and I believe that it's only ever had one other family in it besides us, but for some reason the house was full of spooky crap. As soon as we moved in, my older sister started getting night terrors, the middle sister started sleepwalking, and I was lucid dreaming the house being on fire with me controlling everything but the fire. Fortunately this only lasted a couple months, but while it was going on it was bad. My sister would sleepwalk and curl up behind the sofa, and my other sister, the same one from the story 1, would have horrid nightmares and she would wake up screaming. But after a while they died down and we all got on with our lives. As quite a young child I would often avoid the unused living room and refused to go in it alone. My sister used to have a teddy which would always end up in that room. I would get the blame, but I never touched it, and my older sister was at the age when she was disinterested with her younger siblings, so I don't believe it to be her. And my middle sister never liked having that teddy away from her bed, so she wouldn't do it herself. I know a lot of what I'm saying could be put down to mundane things, but just keep reading, I promise you. As I grew up in that house, weird things continued to happen. I can't recall a lot of them, but they often get tossed around at family parties. I think we had a bulb in our hallway that would always blow even though we had the wiring checked and there was nothing wrong. The TV would switch channels halfway through shows without anyone being in the room, stuff like that. Just a little bit more background information. Around the age of 10 I moved out with my mum to my stepdad's house, which is in the same small town as my granny's house. Since I wasn't in that house as much, my experiences get a little more limited but just as freaky. Also about the age of 11 my granddad passed away. He died of an infected leg which had previously been amputated. This meant that we had equipment to help him get around, like a rising and lowering bed as well as a chair to help him get up. After my granddad passed, all my cousins, aunties and uncles got together to celebrate his life. We all ended up staying at the house. The cousins all ended up in the main living room. My grandparents had 6 children, so you can imagine how squeezed for space we were with all the cousins. I don't remember exactly how many there were, but 10 plus at least. I had managed to get a place on my granddad's chair where I curled up to sleep while listening to my cousins and sisters laugh and chatter. I must have dozed off pretty soon because I woke up at 4 in the morning if the clock I saw was right. The chair started to rise as it would if my granddad had been trying to get up. I looked around thinking my cousins were messing with me, but I could see they were all asleep and that the remote for the chair had been knocked off the table and was lying on the floor in front of me with the batteries out. I was frozen as the chair started to sink back to normal. People always try to avoid the unused living room and my old bedroom if they can, saying it feels like they are being watched and that it is too atmospheric. Me and my cousin stayed at that house a year later. We stayed up late and watched TV and stuffed our faces. However, at about 5 in the morning she wakes me up saying she thinks she can see someone in the kitchen, as you can see into the kitchen from the living room. I told her to go to sleep and that it was probably nothing. She stayed awake all night continuously hearing noises. I woke up and she took me into the kitchen where a couple cupboards had been left open. Obviously she could be faking this, but she is an honest person and rarely lies about anything. The last kind of big event was similar to one before. My uncle died about this time last year. I would have been 16. We all got together at my grand's house like we did for my granddad and celebrated his life, trading stories and the like. This one doesn't really involve me until later. Anyway, my cousins, who are the daughters of my uncle that died, are criminal psychologists and do part-time work at a mental asylum, and one is even a medium, so they are pretty strong-willed people. Anyway, they were staying in my old room when they were woken up to someone whispering Tam, which is a shared nickname between my dead uncle and granddad. They were sharing a bed, but after a minute the whispering stopped and the bed was pushed up from under them, like someone was lying under the bed and pushing up with their feet, is how they described it. My medium cousin says that the room was filled with energy, and so they left and stayed for a hotel for the night in their car. The next night we were all sitting in the living room, maybe 10 of us, and we were having a small silence for our lost relatives when all of a sudden we hear huge footsteps walking up and down the hall. My family have accepted the presences in that house, and we are sure that there is at least one family member there. We even get a medium to come by every couple of months to check on the place to make sure everything's cool. I do have other experiences, but that's all the ones to do with my grandparents' house. Sorry it was so long and not particularly interesting. Comment what you think about this. Thanks for reading.